Hello, lovely people. Welcome to the Almita Made channel. My name is Alma. I am here to chat about making, mainly sewing and other bits and bobs. But today's vlog is very much about sewing. So this is one that I've been wanting to do for quite a while now. And it sounds so grand as a title, but it is my sewing origin story. I personally love hearing how different people got into sewing, people who are in the sewing community that I, follow and enjoy their makes all the time. I love to hear how they got started. So I thought it might be interesting for you to hear how I got started. And I do think that it's a little bit different, a little bit of a different path, I suppose. So this is what we're doing today. I'm going to share with you how I got into this hobby that we hopefully all love. If you're watching this, I will assume that you're at least vaguely interested in sewing. So I came to sewing very late, I would say. I never learned as a kid. I grew up in Italy and it was not taught in my school. I'm pretty sure it was not taught in any school. I don't know any Italians of my generation who learned to sew at school. We did no such thing as home economics. That was not there in the curriculum. We did a lot of subjects, but that was not one of them. So I'd never been near a sewing machine throughout my youth and childhood, never really known how sewing worked or anything like that. What I had been around was embroidery, because my maternal grandma is an incredible embroiderer, but that was never something that I learned to do or was interested in, to be completely honest. Now I'm a little bit interested, but grandma doesn't embroider anymore. But that was the only kind of craft that I saw around me, to be honest. I was not brought up with crafts at all. I was brought up with music, performance, dance, and drama, all of that. So from a very young age, those were my hobbies, like from a very, very young age. And I just did a lot of all of that, which was fantastic and lovely. And it's what I really wanted to dedicate my life to, was performing up until a certain point, which we'll come to in a bit. And yeah, strap in, because this is going to be a long-winded a long-winded story. You're going to get to know me quite a lot, I think. But yes, so I did not grow up with crafts. I never thought of myself as a creative person in terms of, I think there's a big difference between performing something that someone else has created and you're just making it your own and performing it. But I never, and that is creative, but I never thought of myself as someone who could create something from nothing. Growing up, it was always about, taking the material and making it as good as possible, which is lovely, but it's a very different feeling, I think. So anyway, sewing was not even in my peripheral vision. And then I moved from Italy to the UK to study drama at University of East Anglia. Little shout out if anyone's familiar. I loved my years there. That's where I met Pat, my husband. That's where I met my bestest friends, who are basically my family here in the UK. So I had an amazing time, loved studying drama and literature, very much my biggest interests. Then I moved to London and I decided I wanted to go to drama school. So I managed to get in to a 1-year course. I couldn't really afford the 3-year course by that point after uni, but I did a 1-year course in musical theatre at Mount View Academy, which was very tough. I can't say I loved my time there. It was amazing. I learned a lot, but it wasn't a happy time for me at all. Drama school, if you know anyone who's been through it, at least back in the day, this would have been 2010. At that point, drama schools were not great places for humanly, I'm going to say. And it was, there was a very different way of teaching. I'm sure things have changed. In fact, I know, because there are now roles like to safeguard students and make sure that everyone's okay. And mental health is just recognized as something we should look out for with young people and everyone really. But there was absolutely none of that in my day. So it was a very tough year. And, performing is a very competitive business, and which makes sense. There's not many jobs. There's so many people who want to do it. But so the competitiveness of it, I found, was not great for me in terms of how much you compare yourself to other people. And, these are all things we're very aware of in life in general now with social media and stuff. But like, if you're trying to go into a career of in the performing arts, it is like so strong. And it wasn't the best. It wasn't the best of times for me. But anyway, I left drama school and I did a lot of performing on the Fringe in London. So just tiny shows. I'm going to be honest, I had some amazing times. I did some shows that I absolutely loved, and I wouldn't I wouldn't not want to have done that. But I spent many years trying to get proper auditions, as it were, trying to go into professional acting. And I did do some professional jobs, but it was just, I wasn't even getting in the room, if that makes sense. This is very much a tangent about the performing world. But anyway, I found myself close to turning 30. I was not in a great place. I had been trying to break into acting for a long time. It was making me feel very, very low. It's not even rejection, because it's not like I was going to loads and loads of auditions and being told no. I was basically doing a lot of small shows where I went to the audition and I did get cast, but there was zero money involved. I realized I couldn't really live like that because I was doing basically full-time jobs alongside it. And it just got to a point where I was so low. I just felt completely invisible within the career that I was trying to get into. And I remember the moment, the day where I was just like, okay, no, that's it. I just cannot pursue this anymore. It's not making me happy. It's not getting me anywhere. And it was an open audition for a musical at Regent's Park Open Air Theatre. I can't remember what the musical was, but anyway, I went. I queued with so many more people. It was an open audition, so anyone could show up. And I queued for hours. And then I got close to the front of the queue, and there's hundreds of people still behind me. I wasn't even I arrived early, but there was still lots of people queuing up, and there was many more people queuing behind me. And I was getting towards the front of the queue, I'm revising my song, thinking about what I'm going to say, whatever. And then the people managing the queue just came up to the front of the queue and said, sorry, we've seen enough people already, so you can all go home. What that does to your spirit, I cannot even describe it. It's horrendous. And of course I cried. I left crying. I'm sure I wasn't the only one crying. I just felt so irrelevant. I felt like I counted for nothing, like humanly a piece of garbage that no one cares about. Horrible. And again, I didn't get to perform and got told, no, you're not good enough. I just didn't even get in there to try and get in. It's a horrible feeling. So that was the day that I went, okay, no, I'm done. I can't do this anymore. And at the time, what I decided to do was to start writing my own material, and I created a cabaret act. So there's lots of places in London where you can perform. There's mixtures of very different styles of performing. So I was doing comedy songs basically, and I started writing them. I was like, oh my God, I can write songs. That's good to know. I can write scripts. I can write things like this. That came out of I'm just fed up with having to wait for someone to give me a play that I can be in or a song that I can sing. It really lit up a fire in me in that sense, that awful audition day. And I started doing my own stuff. started performing. Again, zero money, very little money. But I had this act. I was excited about it. I was doing different things. And I started looking. The character was called Diva Regina, very much a very extra persona who I decided would dress very glamorously. So I started looking in charity shops and vintage shops. I started looking for basically costumes for my cabaret act. I found a few things, and then I remember I found one dress that I really liked, but it was really see-through, and a friend of Pat's knew how to sew, so I asked her if she could add a lining, not really knowing if that's something you can do, and she did an amazing job. And at the time I remember thinking, gosh, can you imagine if I could learn to do this? That would be interesting. And it was also a time when RuPaul's Drag Race was on TV, and I loved that show. And if you've ever watched it, there's always one episode in every series where the drag queens have to sew up something on the spot. And so I was doing this cabaret act, which was kind of adjacent to drag, if that makes sense. If you think of like a comedy queen, that was the vibe. And I would perform on nights where there would be clowns and burlesque acts and drag queens and a little bit of everything. And I was quite happy in that environment. But so watching the queens on Drag Race sewing up costumes, I thought, oh, imagine if I could do that. That would really unlock something, because then I could create really mad costumes that I could never afford to buy probably. And I would say these things out loud while watching Drag Race, and Pat listened very carefully and stored up that information. And when I turned 30, which is about the time when I started, when I decided to stop pursuing acting, Pat, for my 30th birthday, got me my first sewing machine. And what that meant at the time, I'm gonna get emotional because I think it's the single best present I have ever received in my entire life. And I got emotional at the time. I'm still emotional thinking about it, because it was something that, I just said in passing as a comment, like, oh, maybe I could try that. I could try sewing for costumes, nothing fancy, but like, something that I could explore, because I'm writing my, my words, my jokes, I'm writing my songs. Why couldn't I also create the costumes? I had no idea if I could, but I thought that's a possibility. And Pat got me the means to do that, the instrument. And I know I could have gone out and bought my machine, but sometimes you just need a little push. And he got me this Brothers sewing machine from John Lewis, very basic, but it did everything I needed it to do. And I was so scared of it for the first few months. I just didn't touch it. I was just like, oh, this feels like a big moment. Like I could feel that it was going to change things. And I was almost scared to start. Not because of thinking, oh, what if I don't know how to do it? Because obviously I knew nothing. I knew I would be starting from complete zero. But it's like I could feel that this thing, this machine, this object was going to change my life. That feels so big to say, but honestly, it did. It clearly did. Here we are. I've got a sewing channel on YouTube. But yes, so I didn't touch the machine for, I'm going to say, at least a couple of months. And then Pat went away one weekend and I had time on my hands, and I decided to watch the instructional DVD that came with the machine. I don't know if they still come. I don't think most machines come with a DVD, but this one did. And I decided to watch it, and I learned how to thread it and how to do, a few straight stitches. And I was like, okay, interesting. So these are the sort of basics. And then I love YouTube because you can find anything on YouTube. You found me. But I started looking for tutorials, and I was like, okay, so what's the first thing I could sew? What can I make? And with the machine, Pat had got me a little bit of fabric, some zips, some thread. And so I don't know how, I don't know what tutorial I used, but I found something that taught you how to make a little zip bag. And that zip bag I still have. Here she is. And it's one of the proudest things I've ever made because it was the first thing that I made. It is lined. It has an invisible zip. Why? I don't know. How did I do that? It's quite neat, the invisible zip. The corners of the bag are horrendous, but I spent the weekend trying to get this, and I ended up following a tutorial. I ended up with a physical object. What that did to my brain is so major. To get that feeling of there's a piece of fabric and a zip, and what I did turned them into an object that I can actually use. I used this just to keep coins or things like that. Now I've got just some haberdashery that I keep in here in my box of haberdashery stuff. But I don't know, that I had not had that feeling before of creating something with my hands that wasn't there before. At school, I just remember not being very good at art, drawing, or anything like that. I remember being told that I was not very good at writing, which is very interesting. Again, different times, but I remember my teacher, because when you had to do creative writing, I remember having in elementary school a teacher that basically told me I wasn't a good writer. And, now I do marketing and copywriting, and I think I can write pretty well. But yes, I wasn't encouraged in that direction of creating something out of nothing, out of a blank page, out of a plain canvas, or anything crafty. That is not something that I was ever aware that I could do at all. So sewing up this tiny little bag, to me, it honestly rewired my brain. It really did. And I remember when Pat came back from being away that weekend, he was like, "Oh, so how was it? How was your weekend?" And I hadn't told him that I'd got the machine out. And he just came back and I said, "Look, I've made this." And he was excited because, finally I'd used his present, which was just lying there for ages. And I was excited because I'd made something with my hands. And that really got me going. And I learned everything that I know about sewing. I learned on YouTube, watching tutorials. It is such an incredible resource. I do think some people love to learn in person. I personally really like videos because I can rewind when I don't understand something, rather than having to stop a class, say. I can watch things over and over and over and over and over again, and I do, just to get the step that I'm finding difficult. And so after the zip bag, I think what I started doing was following tutorials to sort of copy your clothes. Things like, you have a t-shirt, you can use that as a pattern, basically. And I made a few things like that. They were never fantastic, but again, the thrill of making clothing that you can then wear, incredible. Then I started working with big 4 patterns. I found that quite tricky, but I did make a few that I really loved. And I did start with clothes for the stage. So for my cabaret act, Diva Regina. And I'll put some pictures up if I can find them. But they were very, very glamorous things that were constructed very badly on the inside. But they were costumes, so I really didn't care. Like, no one's going to see this on the inside. It doesn't even need to be too hard wearing because I only wear it on stage for 10 minutes here and there. And I made a few things. I remember this McCall's pattern with like a cowl back in gold lame. Like, what was I thinking? Like, really tricky fabrics, and it was lined and things, and I did it. And again, not a neat sew, but it looked incredible. And when I started telling people, at the shows, I was like, "Oh yeah, no, I made that." People's minds were blown, and I started getting this feeling of like, "Oh yeah, no, this is really special. Not everyone can do this. This is exciting. This feels like a little bit of a superpower." Then I started, I think I drafted a few things for the stage as well. One of my proudest makes ever is a transformation dress, so a reveal dress. Again, this is taken from Drag Race, where often you would get an outfit that turns into something else in front of your eyes. And I really wanted to create something like that for one of my numbers. I will insert a clip here because this is my very special reveal dress. So that is all self-drafted, and I made a corset. I made it turn into different things. I am honestly, when I look at that, I feel incredibly proud, and also like, how did I do that? I have no idea. Self-drafted, blows my mind. And it's the kind of thing that I look back on and I'm like, wow, you did good. You did good. That's impressive. So I made more and more of my onstage costumes. And then I started discovering indie sewing patterns, and I realized, oh, I could actually make some clothes for life as well, couldn't I? I made a few things that I was so happy with, and I always felt like, oh, I just need to learn how to make things tidy on the inside as well. Like I realized that for me, maybe that was something important, not for my costumes, but if I wanted to make clothes to actually wear, for them to last, I wanted to make sure that I could make them strong. I didn't have an overlocker until years later. So then I discovered French seams. I started French seaming everything. I felt so proud of that. That felt really special. And like, you don't see French seams in ready-to-wear clothes, not the clothes that I can afford anyway. So it felt like couture, darling. That leveled up the whole thing even more. And yeah, I really, you know how they say you need to put in 10,000 hours to become good at something? I feel like I really did. In my first years of sewing, I put in the hours because I got obsessed. And I was in a full-time job in an office, and I was doing my cabaret shows every now and then, not very frequently, whenever I could find them. And then any other minute was spent sewing. I just got completely obsessed. I would sew way into the night and then, wake up and go to work, but sew for hours at night, sew all weekend, and just learn and absorb all the knowledge that I could and make harder and harder things every time. It was like taking a crash course into this hobby. And I was proving to myself that I could learn something new, which I think once you leave education, it's not all the time that you exercise your brain in that way, unless you do a course in something. That felt really good. That felt like my brain was getting a workout as well as my hands. Then I was getting clothes that I really enjoyed wearing. And this is something that I've always, basically growing up, I always wanted to dress uniquely, let's say. And the way I used to be able to do that was mostly like secondhand or vintage shopping and things like that, because I didn't know how to sew and I didn't have enough money to buy, designer stuff, that's for sure. But I liked to dress not like everyone else. Like in high school, I remember everyone wanted to look exactly the same, and I had the opposite of that. I just wanted different things. So learning to sew my own clothes gave me the tools to actually create the clothes that were different from everybody else's. That was great. Then I started learning more about fitting. So I started being able to create clothing that fit me better than what I could buy in a shop. That felt amazing as well. And I think the biggest thing that sewing did was that it gave me a proper hobby, like a grown-up hobby, because you could say I'd had hobbies since a very young age, with singing and dancing and acting, but that turned into not a hobby at all once I started pursuing it as a career. And also, it's the kinds of things that you can't really do on your own. And I'd never realized, like, I've always been quite good to spend time on my own. I love, reading, for example, which is a hobby as well. But I had never had a thing that you do just yourself, like sewing. I don't even know if I'm explaining it correctly, but with everything to do with performance, you have to wait for someone to ask you to do it. You need for the material to have been created elsewhere by someone else, and you kind of have to wait for someone to let you perform, which is, it's not great for your self-worth. That's it. It's not great for your self-worth, because you can only do the thing that you are good at, that you think you're good at anyway. You can only do it if someone lets you. Learning to sew, I suddenly, I put in the time and I got good at it, and that's it. I am good at sewing. That feeling, once I finish a project, I'm like, wow, well done. Like, this was in here, you made it happen, and now you have this beautiful thing, and you get to wear it and feel amazing in it. And don't get me wrong, yes, I love sharing my things on social media. I love getting compliments when I'm out and about. Of course I do. I'm very, obviously, like, I'm a performer at heart. So I love that validation. But the fact that I can spend a whole weekend on my own doing the thing that I love just for myself, it gives me a boost of self-worth that I had never experienced ever in my life before learning to sew. Because it's, feeling like you're very good at something that even if no one sees it, you can tell that you've done it well. That's huge. And I'm guessing that if you're listening to this, you sew or you craft, you do some kind of crafting. And if you don't, I really recommend that you pick up something, and be aware that you're not going to be amazing at it straight away. I definitely wasn't. However, I do think I have something in my genes that meant I could pick it up quite easily. But to get good at it, to make the things that I make these days, I've just put in the hours a lot. I think seeing the fruits of that effort is such a boost for your soul. This feels so big, but I honestly mean it. And I think we can get stuck on the things that don't turn out well. And believe you me, things don't turn out well for me either. But I think it's very, very important to celebrate yourself and give yourself credit for when you do put in a lot of time into making something, and that something just was not there. Do you realize the major effect of that? That's something that wasn't in the world, and now it is, thanks to you, your hands, your time, your effort. That is something that you must appreciate in yourself. I am someone who is very hard on myself, and I am sometimes talk to myself in a way that I would never talk to any other human being. I don't know if you know what I mean, but like, if I get something wrong, I get really upset at myself, and like, feel like I'm stupid and useless and that kind of thing. And it's something I have to work very hard to not do. But because of that, I really make sure that I celebrate the wins, and I celebrate the things that objectively I can see that I've done well. And I hope that this is giving you permission to celebrate yourself and the things that you do. Because something to keep in mind is that we are a small part of the population who knows how to sew clothes. Not everyone can do this. When I'm you know, on the tube, for example, and I'm wearing something that I've made, if I'm not having a great day, I do sometimes stop and think, oh, I did make this dress. That's pretty amazing. I don't think anyone else in this carriage can do that. That's quite amazing. Well done, Alma. That gives me a little boost of, yeah, self-worth is the word. I can't think of another word, because it makes me feel competent and good at something, even if on that day I'm feeling low because I've messed up another project or whatever. I then take a second, look at what I'm wearing. I'm like, oh, but I did make this. You know, now I've made swimsuits, coats, I've made jeans, I've made really complicated dresses and costumes, and I made a suit for a teddy bear once, that with limbs that detached for for a show. Yeah, I've made some incredible things, and I think it's important to stop and take stock. You remind yourself of what you are capable of, especially when you don't feel like you're having a good day. And I think that this is across all crafts that you do with your hands. I think this is something that you can apply to anything like pottery, cooking, baking, all of those things. Woodwork, I don't know, tapestry, the list goes on, really. Knitting, which I'm getting more into, embroidery for sure. But there is something that's very specific to these hobbies, where you can spend hours by yourself creating something, and then you've made something out of nothing. I think that's a very, very special feeling, and the fact that you don't need anyone else. And yes, of course, let's not lie, this hobby is not cheap. However, you can do things with very little. You know, find fabrics at the charity shop, old curtains, things like that. You could create things for very little money. Of course, we choose to get the beautiful fabrics, so then we do spend the money. But there are ways around it. And if it's just for practicing purposes, you know, when you're starting out, I used very cheap fabric wherever I could find it, and repurposed duvet covers and things like that. Still do that. So there are ways. So you do, of course, need a sewing machine. You need some materials, but mostly you need yourself, your attention, your care, your passion, your time. And that means that you're going to create something so specifically you, which is art. To me, that's why I love the term sewist rather than sewer. I don't know if everyone knows this, but basically sewist is a portmanteau of sewing artist. Sewer is, you know, someone who does the act of sewing, which is lovely. The reason I don't love that word is just because it's spelled the same as sewer. So if you search on Instagram, for example, if you search the hashtag sewers of Instagram, you end up with sewer images, which is weird. Why does that hashtag exist? But yeah, that's why I really, really prefer sewist. But also because it has the art part in it. Because I do think that we're not just following instructions, we are creating something that's very personal to us. And so I love that term. But yes, so my journey into sewing was a little bit long-winded, but once I found it, I fell head over heels into it. And then what happened next was that I did stop performing my cabaret act, which is a shame. And that happened very much due to the pandemic, because I had been gigging fairly regularly and I was enjoying it. And then the pandemic happened. Of course, no gigs happened. I think I could have done more online probably. And I did do a gig. I did a Eurovision inspired gig online, which was a lot of fun. I wrote a song. I'm going to put a link to that if that exists somewhere. I can't remember, but I wrote this song and made this whole video. Had a lot of fun. But after that, I kind of didn't put enough effort into trying to find online performing opportunities. So my cabaret act sadly died away. But it's okay. She served a purpose at a time where I was extremely low about acting, and she gave me a purpose, and she kind of got me into sewing as well, because it was through making the costumes for my cabaret alter ego that I really got brave and, you know, tried new things with sewing and discovered patterns and all of that. And then after sort of just before the pandemic, actually. Yeah, just before, I had decided that, okay, I wasn't going to pursue performing anymore, not in the official way of, going to auditions and trying to get an agent and all of that. And so I decided that basically I had been in a full-time job, office job, for many years, and the reason was that it was a great place to work, but I wasn't doing anything that I wanted to do forever. But I'd stayed there for so long because they were amazing, and they let me take time off when I did have some shows on. They were incredibly supportive and lovely people, and so I stayed there because of that flexibility. But once I decided that I wasn't pursuing that anymore, I was like, okay, no, I want to change and find a job that has something to do with sewing. I don't know how, I don't know where, but I want to make a shift there. And eventually I did find a job at a beautiful fabric shop. And that was scary because I took an enormous pay cut because I had been doing an office job, and now I was going into a completely new job to me, retail. But I was around fabric. I just got very scrappy, did lots of packed lunches, saved as many pennies as I could, and I worked there for a few years. And then the pandemic happened. That was very full on for me. I was cycling there and back, and it just got a little bit too much, and I decided that I couldn't do that job anymore. And then I eventually found the job at Sew Over It. And I think I just decided that I wanted to work in something to do with sewing, and things fell into place eventually with a lot of, effort and working very hard, because I love to work very hard at every single job that I've ever done in my life. And I've done many. Washed dishes in a restaurant. I ushered at a theatre for many, many years. I've done events work. That was the worst. But yes, I've had so many jobs in my life, but I am one of those people that if I've got a job to do, I want to do it at the best of my abilities, no matter what the job is. I think it's a question of pride. You want to take pride in what you do. So even if it's not what you want to do forever, you put in the effort. And you never know where things might take you, because I think do the best that you can, and usually hard work is rewarded. So oh, I feel like I've gone on many a tangent, but I feel like you needed to know the backstory to know why I'm so obsessed with sewing and why it means so much to me, because sometimes it can be seen as superficial to care about what you're wearing. I don't think it is superficial. I think it does big things to your soul and mood and spirit. And the fact that sewing has historically been seen as a kind of, as women's work that's unimportant. It's a huge skill. Not everyone can do it. And the fact that it's been kind of looked down on as, domestic, I think, is the word that sometimes gets used in a very derogatory way, makes me very angry. But to me, it's just another kind of art, another kind of self-expression, and it has the potential to give you the self-worth that you might not be finding elsewhere in your life or in your work or in whatever is going on with you. Being able to create something out of nothing is an incredibly powerful thing, and you should remind yourself of that all the time. Whenever you feel low, look at your mermaids. It's huge. It's major, okay? It's revolutionary. So well done, you. And if you don't so already, go and learn, or learn another craft. But trust me, it will do amazing things. Also, of course, one of the big things about this hobby is that it can keep you away from screens. Although, I always watch something or listen to something while I sew, but I mean, I'm not attached to my phone while I'm sewing or knitting or whatever. So that's very good for our brains and our minds. But yes, all of this to tell you that what started with a teeny tiny zip bag has now turned into the biggest driving force in my life, to be honest. I've got this channel now, which I'm so proud of. Thank you so much for everyone who has subscribed already. If you haven't, do consider it. If you enjoy the videos that I've been putting out there, do consider buying me a coffee. The link is below. If you can't, just give this video a big juicy thumbs up. Share with people who like this kind of content. Let everyone know that this is a fun space to visit every now and then. And until I see you next time, do keep making, keep chatting about making, and keep being proud of everything that you make. Bye.
Life was alright till we entered 2020. We used to go out, but now all the streets are empty. There's nowhere to go, no place for my heart to fly. No restaurants, no bars, we must make our own espresso. No travels to plan and no invites to decline. So we're all staying home, and always we must now be we work out at home while we question our existence. See no one for days, yes, we're keeping social distance. Handshakes are out, but hey,